kind of skim through and let's go on to the story. And then I found out maybe I shouldn't have been skimming because it's some pretty good stuff in here, at least for me. And so maybe y'all can get something out of it as well. 2 Samuel chapter 23 down to verse 8 is where I'm going to be. It comes up again over in 1 Chronicles chapter 11. And we could spend all evening talking about how come Samuel and Chronicles is a little bit different. How come the names and the numbers don't match up exactly right? How come, depending on your translation, do they give a different name or arrangement in your translation compared to other translations? And then we could talk about how in the Hebrew it's this way and how in the Septuagint it's this way. And eventually your eyes will glaze over and go, that was all interesting, but we didn't get anything out of it. I want to dig into these in a way that we can go, oh, wow. Because that's the part of it that I enjoy. And if you really want to dig into why the names are like they are and the numbers and how they're a little bit different here and there across the way, have all kinds of fun with it. But there's something that really, I think that is good here that we can dive into. Because we get into, now, my philosophy on names in the Bible, especially Old Testament, however you pronounce them, you got it right. Just because they are some challenging names and my tongue doesn't always get all of them. But as you go through, when you look at this list of men in chapter 23 of 2 Samuel, beginning of verse 8, I think what we have to keep in mind, anytime we have names listed in Scripture, there's a reason they're there. They're not just there to fill up space and add more pages to the Bible. There's a reason they're there, and there's a reason these fellows are listed here. If you'll notice one difference I'll talk about here in 2 Samuel and over in 1 Corinthians. In 1 Corinthians, this is given at the beginning of David's reign. They start gathering up, people start gathering around him, and so it says, and here are his mighty men, and talk about how these men, these troops all gathered up to him and how his kingship started. In 2 Samuel, it comes after his final words. Then we get the tag-on story of how he did the census and all the trouble that came up from that. But right here at the end of David's reign in 2 Samuel. So it wasn't something that was just here. It was something that just was a record of these were part of his reign. And some of them, by the time you get to the end of his reign, they're not living anymore, but they're on the list. So this isn't like we're used to history books that run chronologically, and they didn't worry about chronological as much as we do. And just to acknowledge these. Now you have all these men listed, which means that they mattered in this moment. They mattered for David, and it was the honor of being mentioned by name. So that's a big part of it. And so when you start having this list of names, and if you think about who is it that gets talked about whenever you have a list of warriors, who is it that you're going to highlight most? Do y'all talk? What's that? The leaders of them, yes. Who else might get mentioned? The best ones. And so you have both of them. And this is what you end up with. You know, it's like, let me tell you about these folks. Now, he talks about all kinds of other folks, but he says, let me tell you about these guys. Because of who they were and their abilities, they really just stood out. These are not, if you were on the opposing team, it wouldn't be team, would it? If you're on the other side, you wouldn't want to be facing these fellas because they were capable in what they did. And so as you go through here, we find the highlights of the things. So we have Josheb-Basshebeth, Tacomonite. That almost sounds like something from Taco Bell, doesn't it? Tacomonite was chief of the three, raised his spear against 800 men whom he killed in one encounter. I can't even imagine taking on 800 in one encounter, however long that lasted. And so the skill that it highlighted here. And you keep on going. You Eleazar, son of Dodai, the Ahohite, one of the three. Let's see, down to the end of verse 9, he says, the Israelites retreated, but he stood his ground and struck down the Philistines till his hand grew tired and froze to the sword. I mean, he stood his ground in that battle. We get down to verse 11, Shammah. And so they banded together at a place where there was a field full of lentils. The Israeli troops fled from them, but Shammah took his stand in the middle of the field. He defended it and struck the Philistines down. The Lord brought about a great victory. We get 18, Abishai. He raised his spear against 300 men, whom he killed, and so he became as famous as the three. In verse 20, Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, So you can tell I'm just rolling through these, so you know I'm not worried about pronunciation, so y'all just flow with me on this. He performed great exploits. He struck down Moab's 2 mightiest warriors. He also went down into a pit on a snowy day and killed a lion, and he struck down a huge Egyptian. Although the Egyptian had a spear in his hand, Benaiah went against him with a club. He had snatched a spear from the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. It's like this, highlighted the things they accomplished to say, let me tell you what these guys did. And these are their highlight reels. It doesn't even give the whole list of everything they accomplished. So that's a big reason of why these men are listed in this. But I think part of it in describing these fellas is that not only were they skilled, but they showed their courage in standing where they stood. If you notice the theme here, a couple places we find everybody else runs and this one stays. Courage to stay and do what needed to be done in that moment. And so when everybody else is running away, they stand their ground. And so we have their, in 9 and 10, Eleazar stood his ground until his hand froze. Have y'all ever been so tired where your hand just kind of froze up because you've been doing something so long? Can you imagine doing that in this kind of battle to where you're just there? That just shows how long it went. Down further, 11 and 12, Shammah did the same thing, stood his ground in the middle of the field. They stood there, and not just the matter of that they stood there against overwhelming odds. We get up to the top, Josheb, 800. Now, it doesn't necessarily say, you know what, my brain goes to do you know in the movies, if you had 800 men face one, do you know what the 800 men do when they're facing one in the movies? They wait their turn. Don't they? That's what the movies do. It's like they all kind of coordinate it so you don't overwhelm the one who's the main character. But, you look at this and you think, I can't picture, did they all show up at once? Were they spread out to where he met them one? I'm thinking he met them in groups, one by one, that kind of thing. But still the odds of him taking on 800 and being victorious and all of that. And then we have the idea of, I skipped over verses 13 to 17 in the skill, but just the idea that the three that were listed before, whenever David says, I would love some water from that well at Bethlehem. And they break through the Philistine lines and go get him that water. And so that just, the overwhelming odds to go and do what they had done. You have the 300 men by Abishai that he fought. We have Benaiah talked about a huge Egyptian, and with the spear. Some translations talk about that spear being not just a normal one, but huge, heavy. So you talk about this process of them, the courage that they would not just stood their ground, but they stood their ground against overwhelming odds. I think for them to be described, I feel like I'm talking fast, so y'all watch. I think for them to be described as David's mighty men highlights what I think is the most important characteristic for them. Because you talk about their abilities and you talk about their courage, but I think what was most important about this list of men was their loyalty to David. Because how are they described? First and foremost, in verse 8. David's mighty men. It wasn't even a reference of, here's some of the men that were part of the army of Israel, and they were great warriors. It was David's mighty men. And they showed that. We get there in verses 13 to 17, when you have the group of three, when they hear David say, I would love some water from Bethlehem and that well there. Why did they go do that? Because David, there was a connection there that they knew that they had, that they were willing to do whatever it took. And it's like, he is who we serve, and whatever it takes, if he wants this, we'll go do it. So you can hear them in that thought of, if David would say, we need to go take this line, you knew what was going to happen. Anything that went on, they were loyal to him and they were stood with him. And so when you look at that, in fact, in the First Chronicles, in that account in chapter 11, as everybody's gathering to David. That's what's highlighted, that they know he is king and he's just been declared king. And so they are giving their loyalty to him. And so here in 2 Samuel, it's that reaffirmation of here's who stood with David all along and that were there for him in every step of the way. And so they were David's. I wrote in my notes something from 1 Chronicles. I have to look at why I wrote it. Oh, these were the chiefs of David's mighty warriors. They, together with all Israel, gave his kingship strong support to extend it over the whole land as the Lord had promised. This is the list of David's mighty warriors. You know, you hear that they were there for him and they were going to stand with him, whatever it took. And I think that loyalty was such a big part. And when you think about loyalty, how would y'all define loyalty? What does it mean to be loyal? Stand by? Be what? Be there for them. To encourage? Faithful? Do we use the word loyal much anymore? About people? We've got 2 little dogs in my house that follow me around till I get aggravated because I feel like I don't have privacy. And we can talk about dogs being loyal. How often do we talk about people in our lives being loyal? And that's at least in my life, that's not a word that I commonly use. And it's like, why do we not use that much anymore? And you think about a couple of the other terms I think about for loyalty, that idea of devoted. Someone devoted to another. And then when we talk about being devoted, I think we have to talk about love. Did these men love David? I think that would be a great way to word it. There was a connection they had with him that it wasn't just we made a promise, we're going to keep it. It was we stand we stand with David. We're here for him. And so that whatever meant, they were willing to give their lives for him. Which all of a sudden puts it in a different light. And I think the flip side of it's the last fella before the long list. And you hear in verse 24 on down, did y'all catch? I didn't even read that list. Just all those names. But before we get to that list, we have Benaiah there in verse 23. Says he was held in greater honor than any of the 30, but he was not included among the 3, and David put him in charge of his bodyguard. What does that tell you about how David thought about him? That says a whole lot. So it wasn't just a one-way street. It wasn't them that held that affection for David. That David looked at these men and said, if anybody said, David, who are you going to call to go do this? And he didn't have to pause. He knew this is who I would call. So that loyalty that he would have, that they all had for David, being skilled, you have to have that skill, but their courage, but then on top of that, to be loyal to David. And we look at all that, the part that I wanted to wrestle with, besides who climbs down into a pit on a snowy day to get in with a lion, is that courage but that just showed how confident he was in his own ability and that he could handle things. Excuse me. There was what I had to flip this around to, because the reality of looking at these folks and anybody in the Bible isn't just to go, oh, that's nice to know that about them. It's like, what in the world do we learn from these guys? What does it mean to us for us to talk about David's mighty men? And what came to my mind was this thought: who is it that's on your team? I have to tell you, one of my roles in Andrews is that I'm a chaplain for PRMC Hospice, which means I hang around a lot of families and a lot of folks who are at the end of their lives, and I go to a lot of funerals. So now y'all are going, oh, that's sad, but I do it so much that it's just routine. It's life. And because I get to hear a lot of funerals, I can tell you which preachers in Andrews, Texas, I think are better than others because I hear their funeral sermons. But another part of it is listening not to their obituary and listening to how people talk about them. Because when we write our obituaries, who do we put into our obituaries? Family, primarily family. My philosophy, whenever I do a funeral, my philosophy is if I'm doing somebody who's at the older end of life and they have grandchildren, sometimes they'll write in the obituary, they had 8 grandchildren. And I thought they would not say that way. They would know the name of each one. And so I insist, we're going to name each of those grandchildren because for every grandparent I know, those kids mattered that much. And so those names are, I think, one of the most important parts of what goes on. Every once in a while, there'll be a funeral where it's not just family listed, it's a lifelong friend. It's somebody that a special relationship, a strong relationship, and they get listed just among family as well. And I think there's where you get to the mighty men, somebody that they would go, this is somebody I was with all the time. And they're mentioned when I've left this world as part of my life. And these 30, I like 2 Samuel, put it here at the end because talk about these are the people that were part of David and his reign and who he was as he lived in this world. And when we talk about that for our own lives, who is it? Do we have somebody in our lives that we list just like this? These are the people that I know who stand with me, that are there with me. And I think, I stand up here as I'm naturally an introvert. You're thinking, you picked the wrong profession, but you think about it, when I get done, do you know what happens? I get in my truck and I'm by myself for a while. I got to recover. But to think about extroverts, it seems like y'all gather up all kinds of folks around you. An introvert sometimes is a challenge for us. But for both sets, it's still, who is it that we know will stand with us? And that's part of what I want us to grab a hold of this evening. If you don't even remember anybody out of this list, it's that idea of who is it that's on your list. And on the flip side of that is, whose list are you on? Who in your life would say, I know that you are there for me. Because I think that's part of when we talk about having people who are on our team, that's part of that. Who is it that if on their obituary, who is it that they would say, I want their name to be included in there? And we may not meet that threshold to make that point because sometimes family doesn't know that, but that's why you ought to write your own obituary. We had a lady, and see, I'm going to get distracted now. Y'all watch me. We had a lady in Andrews, Joy Jackson. I can remember clear as day when she passed, a sweet, sweet lady, and her family walked in, and she had a yellow pad with every detail of what her funeral was supposed to be. Pallbearers, obituary written out, everything, music. I was surprised she didn't have the sermon all written out for me just to read it. And I encourage folks, that's a wise thing to do. It's not a bad thing to do. Write down what you would like to have happen when people think about you. Because it makes a world difference. Because for family, we're sitting around going, well, what music? I don't know. They kind of like this. If you've got a list, we're going, I know exactly what music. So we put, just a side note, that's a freebie for you. So that idea of having a team, somebody that stands together. Now, when you think about as brothers and sisters in Christ, as people who are together, that, you know, one of the emphasis that we have through Scripture, John 17, when Jesus is praying, what he emphasizes there is that reminder. He says, "Oh Lord, may they be one as we are one." But it showed who he was by our unity. And I think our unity is just that we stand together. We stand with one another. And we can't have everybody in the world that we stand with, but we have a group of people that we know, these are my people. You think Jesus had the 12, he had 70 sent out. Actually, he had, 3 that were even closer? So it wasn't everybody, but in our lives, we know, I'm here for you, but there are some folks that I know that I'm even closer to, who is it that you call at 2 a.m. that you know would show up if you were in trouble? And there's a great indicator of life right there. And so when we look at that aspect of what goes on, to be loyal, to be united, to love, to be devoted to each other, it's just a reminder of, I'm here for you. Galatians chapter 6, the first couple verses. Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught into sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Now, we talk about that. When we talk about going to somebody who's been caught up in a sin, who is it that you want walking into your door to talk to you about some struggle you're having? Somebody you kind of know, or somebody that you know is there because they love you? And it's heartbroken because they're scared of what may be if it's that bad. And they're there for you. And that's when we talk about loyalty, that's what we're talking about. Somebody who will walk in and be there for us. And so on and on. I got a couple others we'll just throw out. Ephesians 4:29. When you think about it from this perspective, who is it? These people will be the people that will do this for us. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Now we talk about that unwholesome talk. Usually we jump to cuss words, but he's not talking about that here. He's talking about words that tear down. He says, don't be the people in other people's lives that are like that. Be someone who builds others up. And so the people who are on your team are the people who build you up with their words. They talk about what they see in you, what the hopes they have for you, what they can see, what you can do it, to encourage you and be there for you all along. Chapter 5, verse 20 in Ephesians, he says, this is a fun one. Usually the men want to skip to verse 22, but verse 21 is the one where it all starts, because there he says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. That means all of us are there for each other. And that idea of submit is, I like to picture, I went through basic training and had to learn to march. You know what happens when you get the one fella in your group that's uncoordinated in front of you? It is sure hard to keep in step. You got to look the other way. You got to keep your eyes closed. But when you're all together, that part of what we had during all that time was we knew we were there for each other. No matter what went on, we were there for each other. That idea of submit is that idea of we're lined up together and we're going to get through this together in support of one another. And so we have that for each other, and we look to each other for that. See, y'all need a clock. Okay. So when we look at that idea of being together on and on, like our gifts, Romans chapter 12, I don't want to give you everything I've got, but I want this picture. In verses 3 through 8, in talking about the gifts that we have for each other, verse 4 is where I want us to start. For just as each of us has one body with many members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. That's the part I want us to grab a hold of. He goes on and talks about how we're all different and what we're able to do, but he says, what you're able to do makes a difference in everybody else's lives. You're here for everybody else. We don't talk about, well, I can't. Well, we're not talking about what you can do. We're saying God has put you in a place where you can make a difference in the people that are around you right now. And you belong to those folks. Whether it's that you can give encouragement, whether it's that you are able to notice what needs to be and you step in and you provide that, whatever it is, whatever your ability is, God says you're there for those folks. And that's part of the team that we have, is that we are there for each other and all that. Down in verse 10 is another one. Be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourselves. There's that devotion of loyalty, where we are there for each other no matter what. And I think when it comes down to it, then when we have loyalty, when we stand together, it makes us stronger together. When we talk about being courageous, there back over in, now I've turned my page, so y'all, this is your homework. Back over in 2 Samuel, when he talks about a couple of guys and their victories, it says, the Lord gave the victory. The Lord gave the victory. And the reason they were able to do what they did was because they knew God was with them. And I think when they went into battle, it wasn't just they knew God was with them, they knew they had each other as well to go through that. And you're like in Joshua chapter 1, all those posters, be strong and courageous. But if you'll read chapter 1 in Joshua over and over again, you find when God tells Joshua, be strong and courageous, because I'll be with you. When the tribes are from the eastern side are telling him, be strong and courageous, and we're going to be with you. Anybody stand against you, we're stepping in. And so on and on, that idea of being courageous isn't you've got it in yourself that you be strong, you be courageous all by yourself. That's not the way it works. Our courage comes because we know who is with us. And so when we have each other's back, when we're there for each other, we're able to do what we couldn't do alone. When we know God is with us, we can do what we weren't able to do on our own as we go along because of those who are with us. So we stand together. That idea of, I got curious. I'd look to see when it talks about being confident, when it talks about having courage, when it talks about all those things, through the New Testament, it tends to reference our relationship to God through Christ, how we can have confidence, how we can have courage. And I thought, well, is there any place where it ever talks about how we become confident or we become courageous because of the people around us as well? The way it does it there is it says, encourage one another. 1 Thessalonians, about 11? Encourage one another. Encourage one another with these words. Over and over again, we get told, encourage. That idea of being there and saying, come on, we can do this together. We can make this without any kind of problem. And to know, we already know God is there. God is faithful. Sometimes we forget, but that idea of knowing God is with us as we go along. So the challenge, I think, is how do we do that? I believe in my short little life, it's harder for me to say my short life because it's getting longer day by day. But the changes that have gone on in our culture, which affects all of us, in my lifetime, seems to have made it a little bit more of a challenge to have relationships that are close. I hope I'm wrong, but it seems that way. When I was growing up and somebody moved into a house close by, you know what my mama did? She made cookies or something. She gathered us up, and we all walked over to welcome into the neighborhood. We knew all our neighbors. You know, it is possible now to live on a street full of houses and families and not know all of our neighbors. I mean, it's not necessarily because we are falling short as much as it's just our culture. And so because we have that, it means that a lot of the relationships that happened, I remember, y'all know what Bunko is? Card game? Wild. People lost hands because of it, I'm sure. I remember we would go down when I was in junior high, we'd go down to the neighbor's house, and there'd be a table full of adults. The kids are all on our own. playing bunco all together. And that only happened because that was neighbors gathered up to sit around a table to play cards together and have a fun time. Because they knew each other, which meant I had to get to know all those kids as I was growing up. And so today, for this to happen, I look at that and go, those things aren't happening the same way. But there's got to be some way for us to purposefully say, I don't want to be that way. I want to build relationships. I want to build a team where I have people in my life that I know that stand with me, and that I have people that I stand with, that they know I'm here for you no matter what. It takes proximity. We moved around a whole lot when I was growing up. Longest I lived in one spot when I was a kid was 3 years in Hondo, Texas. Other than that, it was a couple years, sometimes it was a few months. And the downside of that was, let me tell you what happens when you do that growing up. My wife was born and raised in Beaumont, Texas. We got married in Beaumont. We'd go through the mall. It tells you how long ago it was that we walked through the mall. How many people go walking to the mall anymore? We'd go through the mall, and she'd say, oh, I went to second grade with them. You know, you could take everybody I went to second grade with and put them on a lineup against the wall, and I couldn't tell you who I was in second grade with. We moved after third grade. I don't know any of those people. So that idea of knowing, which means I've spent a lifetime forgetting names of people. Because once we moved, my brain said, they're gone. Part of what goes on and when we build relationships is that if we don't see each other regularly, if we're not close to each other regularly, we don't build a close relationship. I was trying to remember where I was going with all of that, and I was getting lost in my story. We have to have proximity and time together, so we go, I'm here, which means I have to purposely spend time with people that I want to grow close to in that proximity, that I have to notice what's going on. And it's hard for us in a lot of ways when we're busy, when we've got things going on, to see other people and what's going on in their lives and to be there. We've got to do it on purpose. And I don't necessarily have the perfect answer for that. Where did I put that note? I have a note here somewhere. Oh, I remember. This is it. So I want to tell you a couple of dreams in my life I've had. My father-in-law, who passed several years ago, had the knack of, I believe when he and my mother-in-law would go traveling, they stopped at every Walmart in every town they went through. And he was the kind, he'd walk in and he might stay at the door and talk to the greeter or anybody else at the door the whole time till my mother-in-law got through getting what she wanted to get and they came back out. Or he might be at the back of the store talking to somebody, spending the whole time talking. In fact, my mother-in-law whistles really loud. And that's how she would call him out of the store. She'd whistle, and pretty soon you'd see his head. He's 6'3", 6'4", so you see him coming out of the back of the store as they were called along. But it was like, that would be a trait I would love to develop. Walk into any Walmart, have a conversation to whoever's there. But another trait I want to develop is that there was a group of boys in Andrews, Texas. They're all in their 20s now. Pretty much grown. They don't feel grown to me, but they're grown now. One of them's married, got two little ones. My word. But this group of boys were an interesting bunch. They were close. Now, I only knew them from probably late elementary, junior high on. But this group of boys were lifelong friends for the most part. And you got up in junior high and they stayed close with each other. In fact, one girl started to like one of the boys and was kind of jealous because of the relationship, and she tried to bust things up. And you know who was no longer a girlfriend. They kept their relationship rather than the girl. And so as you watch them, this group of boys, what was fun to watch is that they would tell each other, I love you, wherever they were. Junior high, high school, they talk about how they loved each other. They were there for each other. they spent time together all the time, and I thought, that is a beautiful picture. Because they'd hug on each other. They had no qualms at all about it. They didn't care what anybody thought about them. Good bunch of boys. Now they've kind of scattered out, but when they see each other, they still have that close connection. And I think that would be a wonderful picture for all of us, wouldn't it? A group of people that are just natural for us to say, oh, I love you. Group of people that we hug on, that we think about, that we're there for. I think that's what these men are a great example of for all of us. What time is it? 21. Man, is it bad to finish early? I've got another page of notes somewhere, but I can't find it. Actually, I had some thoughts that I can't remember where it went. I lost it on the way down that I didn't write down. There's a flaw. If you don't write it down, it's gone. But I think for all of us, just to have some time just to build those close relationships. We can't buy that. And lifelong relationships. That's what I don't have compared to my wife. You know, she has a friend that she talks to almost every day, that they met each other in early elementary school. They lived in the same neighborhood. And here they are all these years later. One lives in College Station. She lives in College Station. My wife's in Andrews. See each other when they get close. They talk to each other all the time. It's like, that's special. And so for all of us to have people like that in our lives make a tremendous difference. I don't have to keep on talking. Y'all have any thoughts or questions about the mighty men or anything? Tell about what? Oh, about me. What do you want to know about me? Where am I from? Oh, do you want to hear the long story or the short? Usually, what I reference on my growing up years is I tell you what grades I went to school where. I'll give you a little bit longer version. I was born in Inglewood, California. My dad was from Texas, right? Born in El Paso, raised in the valley in El Paso, back and forth. My mom, born and raised in Illinois, central part. Her parents had farmland scattered out, and so my dad was going to school out in California. They married. They moved out there. I was born in Inglewood. My brother next down from me was born in Topanga. That's not a word that's meaningful to me, other than my brother was born there. I got to go back sometime just to see these landmarks. My mother's mother was worried that California was going to fall off into the ocean, and convinced them to move back. And so they moved to Illinois because there was some thought about moving into a particular house. And we moved to Illinois. And so we moved to Illinois, to Pana, Illinois, Taylorville, Illinois, Carterville, Illinois. I'm missing one. Owanico. And so we moved in, and Pana, I don't remember, other than the big white barn. Taylorville was where I got to start kindergarten. Here, I'll give you a little fun thing about Illinois back in that day. You know how most regular people in the world, school districts in the world, the cutoff for kindergarten, you have to be 5 by what date? Is it September 1? I think most are September 1. In Illinois at that time, at that district, you had to be 5 by December 1st. My birthday is November 27th. I started kindergarten at 4, turned 5 right before the cutoff. Now that's going to play into the rest of my story. So then we moved to Owanico because my dad was going to go to school at Southern Illinois University to get his power plant mechanics, airframe mechanics degree. And so we went to Owanico. Taylorville was kindergarten, half first grade, finished out first grade at Owanico. Owanico was one of those schools that had multiple grade levels in one classroom. Then we moved to Carterville, Illinois, second and third grade. 3-story red brick building was the school, like 4 blocks from our house. I remember Christmas because I got a bicycle and my mom went out and shoveled the sidewalk so we could ride our bikes up and down the sidewalk. My dad's first job as a mechanic was in Hondo, Texas. He worked on DC-3s and I can't remember which model of Beechcraft, but it was cargo, commercial cargo. And so he did that for several years in Hondo, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. We lived on 27.5th Street. Don't know why in the world they made it 27.5th Street. 27th Street was right behind us. 28th Street was next. I don't know who named it that way. We moved, they moved the maintenance facility to Laredo, Texas, and my parents said, we don't want to live on the border, so he took a position in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Junior high, 7th and 8th grade. Not fond memories. Now remember now, because I started school at 4 and didn't turn 5 till November 27th, now I'm going to school districts everywhere else in the country where everybody else turned 5 before September 1st. So I am generally the youngest by a whole year in every class. I am short and skinny. In junior high, if you're short and skinny, what does that make you bait for? Yeah, I tell you what. And so, when you're short and skinny, though, you can cut corners a lot faster than the bigger boys who are trying to bully you because you're a little bit more mobile. So 7th and 8th grade was Muskogee, Oklahoma. Then my dad, they moved the maintenance facility up to Iowa. We moved into Ottumwa, Iowa for a few months. And for some reason, I don't know why, I need to ask my mom, we moved up to a little town, Fremont, Iowa, 750 people, 13 people in my high school class. So Ottumwa, first few months in 9th grade, Fremont finished out. Now, the advantage of a high school of 13 in my class is that if you're warm, you're breathing, and you can stand upright, do you know what that means you're eligible for? Athletics. I was not athletic in any sense. Remember, I'm short and skinny still. And so all of a sudden I walk in and you get to know everybody. These are some of the relationships that have lasted longer for me than any other because I remember them. We were close. So I ran cross country. I ran track. 5:14 I think was the best in the mile. I was put in the mile because that meant I was slow. So, but I started to feel confident in that. Then my parents got tired of Iowa winters. So I was finished out 9th grade, all of 10th grade, and 2 weeks of 11th grade in Fremont. Then my dad worked for Petroleum Helicopters. We moved to Lafayette, Louisiana, Tacoma High School. A little bitty high school to a big high school. And we were there for a few months. I went through a storm that flooded and almost came up into our house, all that kind of fun stuff. And found out Louisiana has terrible roads, that when you have a neighbor who goes fishing, it usually means he's also drunk, and it's just all kinds of fun stuff. They figured out my dad was 7 on, 7 off. We could move across the border. We moved to Vidor High School, Vidor, Texas, where I went to Vidor High School to finish out 11th grade and then finally graduated my senior year as we went along. Y'all know what Vidor, Texas is known for? I'll give you a... Do you know what Vidor... See all these folks they don't know. Vidor, Texas, well, Vidor, Texas is one of the sundowner towns. And I had those wonderful billboards that gave warnings that if your skin was not the right color, you shouldn't be here. So the Grand Dragon for the KKK used to live there years ago. My 2 youngest children are adopted, and they happen to be black as well. And my brother, who lived in Vidor at the time, said, "Oh, bring the kids and come visit." And I'm like, "I'm not bringing my kids to Vidor, Texas. I'll meet you in Beaumont." So as we went along. But there in Vidor, we ended up going to church in Beaumont at Ridgewood. It's where I met my wife. We married in Beaumont when I was the very mature age of 19. If you're thinking about getting married and you're still saying teen as part of your age, it's okay if you wait a few years, okay? I say that as somebody who did that. So as we went along, and then we moved to Lubbock to go to school at Sunset after we'd been about 1986, finished in 88. Went to Big Spring for 8 years where we worked with youth. Went to Bryan for 10 years where I preached there. We were in Hempstead for 5 years, northwest side of Houston, and now we're in Andrews. I say that story because when I tell them we moved to Andrews from Houston, they go, well, why'd you move to West Texas? It's like, oh, we already knew West Texas. Y'all know the difference between Houston, Texas and West Texas? Green grass, yes. Humidity. Well, when I think about the difference, I think about people. When Beth would go driving in the Houston area, I'd have to think, what would happen if she broke down? You know what happens if she's driving out here and she breaks down? Somebody helps her before I could even get there and blink. We've already had it happen. So it's a big difference. And you can see the sun rise and you can see the sun set. That pretty good. Oh, I have to tell you, I have 3 kids. My oldest is stuck with my genes. He and his wife live in College Station with Tristan, who's 5. My middle son lives in Dallas. He's still single. I don't know if there may be a young lady somewhere out there who might convince him to get married. I don't know. Right now, he's still working through all that. And then my youngest, my daughter, passed away last spring. And she had 3. 2 are with their dad. They're 8 and 9, Carson and Kinsley. And the youngest, Cambry, is 4. And my wife and I have her at our house. And you can see she's not here because if she was here, she would be rearranging furniture. She's nonverbal. She's special needs because of genetic stuff, but she makes her desires known very well, even if she can't give you the words. So, and she's been walking on her own for 7 months now. She took her first steps in December on her own, and so she's still toddling, but she's making progress as she goes along. So she's a hoot. All right, had that covered all right? I gave you the long history. I know there's probably a lot in there you're going, oh, you didn't have to tell us all of that. I mean, yes, sir. I did, yes. On forgiveness, forgiveness for wounded souls. So, 21, 4 years ago. Forgiveness for wounded souls. It's about 100 pages, maybe. Ma'am? Yes, it's on Amazon. So I can tell you, I started working on, I found, you can have everybody on the Sun look at it, give corrections, and then it goes to print, and then you find things that should have been corrected, and you think, how do all of us miss that? I paid an editor even, and she missed it. So, but it was an interesting experience. It was good. We did. Look, oh, has that time been on the screen? That time hadn't been on the screen all the whole time, has it? I was about to say that had to go to sleep because it had something else up there a while ago. It didn't have the time, and I'm like, all this time I've been given a hard time about no clock, and then there's one there. And now I've ended up keeping y'all over time. But appreciate y'all's attention. My oldest cousin on my mom's side, Lindy Jackson. So of course it's her married name. She was Pavlak before that. So, but I have to call my Lindy and say, hey, I met. Is she tall? Is she? Yeah. Yeah.
I appreciate it.